Hey everyone. So we're talking about Pluto in Leo or Pluto in the fifth house today, as well as the polarity point of Pluto in Aquarius or, well, not really Pluto in Aquarius, but Aquarius or the 11th house. Um, there's two things that strike me right away. One is that with Pluto in any sign or house, we're accessing a bottom line vibration. So part of our intuition as readers is to really feel into what does it mean for someone to have Leo as an archetype or the fifth house as the bottom line. If it's going to be Pluto in the fifth house, but in another sign, such as Virgo or Scorpio, then there's going to be a combination of archetypes, and it's going to be playing out in the fifth house, which is about a person's creative self-actualization. And the second thing that strikes me is the nature that the fifth house, being that it's about self-actualization, these are souls that come into this life with something already actualized, some dream that they already have. And part of their work is around creating that in this lifetime. So in Pluto in the first house, or Pluto in Aries, it's about becoming. So there's going to be this impulse for the soul to try out new things, try out new adventures, to take a first step. But by the time we get to the Leo archetype in the fifth house, something is already created. These are souls that have this sense of willfulness in terms of like being directors of a play. So when I've had readings with clients that have Pluto in the fifth house, when I tell them that general theme, that there's something that is already actualized before they came here and they're walking that in this life, I get two extreme reactions, which Pluto is extreme. I get people that right away they light up and they know exactly what it is and they have this vision. Or I have people that are more in this kind of Plutonian confusion where they're like, I don't know what it is, but they want to know and they have that yearning. The fifth house and Leo, I think it's really important to remember that it's connected to the heart. And so all of the symbolism of the heart, even as an organ, applies. So thinking of it as a muscle. Anytime I see planets in the fifth house that are hard planets, and so I'm thinking Pluto, Saturn, or Chiron, namely, these are souls that have really robust hearts. And sometimes they go through some kind of cataclysm or difficulty in life to get that level of robustness in their heart. So I think in terms of education astrologically on what it means to have hard planets in the fifth house, it is really helpful to see that there's going to be transformation. Fifth house Plutos, even though it's like, you know, their bottom line vibration is in the heart, Pluto is potentially a very difficult archetype. It's where we go through, dark night of the soul, total transmutation, death. And so to have that in the house of the heart, these are people that can easily have heartbreaking experiences or difficult childhoods. One thing that comes up with fifth house Pluto or Pluto and Leo is the sense that they couldn't really be who they were in their childhood environment, or there was something, it might not even be the environment itself that really emphasizes that so much as their psychology coming into that environment is going to look at it that way. So the way that their psyche is wired to read a situation might read into not being paid enough attention to, not having enough parental support, not having enough joy, not having enough recognition. So having fifth house Pluto, we're thinking about with Pluto power and disempowerment. And so it's going to be power of the heart as well as disempowerment of the heart. So let me catch my stream of thought, unless there's any ideas or comments so far. Yeah, I lost the stream. I'm thinking about, oh yes, narcissism is like the shadow of Leo, right? Um, and it's actually not a cut and dry, a person is a narcissist or isn't a narcissist. It's a process that exists on a spectrum. And the operating psychology of Pluto in the fifth house, um, part of the gift that you can ultimately work towards with this placement is really being able to feel self-actualized and to empower the self-actualization of other people. It's part of the light of Leo is to shine and recognize the brightness of other people. The shadow of Leo can be needing attention, needing to be in the spotlight, but not wanting to share that with other people or feeling threatened by attention going to others, which is a narcissistic construct. Pluto in Leo, our fifth house, is going to represent the psychological process of being the director of a play, actualizing one's soul. And the polarity point of Aquarius gets drawn in when we can't just go through life as if we're the star of the show or the center of everything, because even though on some level we actually, in this incarnation, in this existence life, we are the center of everything. We can, we have this constant being that we're witnessing the world through. And so there is a kind of sensation of being like the sun and there's things orbiting around us. But that goes to an extreme when psychologically there's some blockage of understanding other people's realities, to only see other people's reality through the point of view of, well, this is what I would want, or this is what I would do, which is a very Pluto in the fifth house or Leo kind of tendency. And because this is the limitation of Pluto in the fifth house or Pluto in Leo, they evolve through confrontation with things that just don't compute with their self-centric vision of reality. So this would be Aquarius or 11th house, which is alienation or something outside of the known. And so this could be, one construct with Leo or Pluto in the fifth house would be giving to another according to how one would want to be given to, or what one thinks that someone else needs. And having that generosity not be well received, to have maybe animosity returned, or the intention seems like, it's generous, but there's some kind of self-centered piece about it, which gets picked up by the receiver, the other person, and there's some kind of confrontation. So events like this will challenge the, Jeffrey Wolf Green calls it pyramid structure of Pluto in the fifth house, where they're at the top of this pyramid, which requires them to be a little bit more objective. So I'm thinking of Aquarius and the 11th house. One thing, the conversation I've noticed, it's funny because it happens on social media, which is a very Aquarian-like structure. There's plenty of articles that we can find on our Facebook news feeds about narcissism, or even just people accusing Facebook and selfies as being this narcissistic structure. And within Aquarius, the idea that there's a bunch of people within the social organism being self-actualized, within Leo in the fifth house, there's such a joy in being oneself and radiating that specialness. Aquarius is also about uniqueness. So to some extent, narcissistic process is not always shadowy. A lot of artists, anyone on a self-actualization path is going to be self-involved at certain points to an extent that it supports whatever it is they're doing. So a person's self-involvement in terms of looking through this archetype is not really to be shamed, or it's not a bad thing. The Aquarius polarity point can bring in some objectivity about what the purpose of this self-actualization track is. So a person, one thing that has become really clear to me on a spiritual level, and just from studying all these archetypes, is that humanity is like an ecosystem. And we all exist for these very special, beautiful reasons. It's even, this beautiful thing that we're all alive, sharing space at the same time. You could walk into a party or something, and everyone who's there, it's like a dream or something, that we're all meeting at this very, one moment. And our life, our social reality is like that. And so we don't need a bunch of people interacting in this web of humanity like someone else or, some ideal. It's great to have people who are really lit up on the inside with their self-actualization. And so that's part of the brightness that can come through with Pluto in the fifth, is that once the kind of the shadow or the sense of restriction, like being blocked from being oneself, which creates narcissistic injury in a sense, where there's some more of that, like, I need attention because I'm missing something. When there is that just rootedness of I'm special and I'm talented and I'm going to share that with the world, it can naturally lend itself to that Aquarius polarity. Thinking about many celebrities will kind of follow this. Lady Gaga, I've had a few different birth times for her, but the last one that seemed to really resonate was her being a fifth house Pluto. And with her, before she became famous, she knew it was going to happen. She had complete faith that that was her track. She was in school. She left school, told her parents, look, just give me this certain amount of time. I know what I'm doing. And she kind of method acted her way to fame. She pretended she was famous, and she just very quickly manifested her life the way that it is. And she's a figure of empowerment to many. Born This Way, one of her songs, is about just empowerment of being who one is. She is a philanthropist. There's many people that have been inspired by who she is. And I think that that's an example of how someone's self-actualization is not just this isolated thing. It does naturally resonate out to the collective, which is the Aquarius 11th house polarity. If there's anything I can clarify, please let me know. I'm losing my train of thought again. Oh, okay. So the ecosystem of humanity, and how when people are lit up within that ecosystem, the ecosystem functions better. A person who's just doing fifth house, just doing Leo, they just want to shine, they just want to be talented, they just want to be special. There can be a time and place for that. That can be someone's path for a given time. But sometimes there can be a restriction for souls with Pluto and Leo, or Pluto in the fifth house, where their self-actualization isn't really, it's just stagnating. It might be like this image of an artist who keeps putting work out in the world and no one's paying attention, no one cares. And rather than, even taking it personally or being like, my art's not good, or people don't like me, any of that, it's a matter of, what is the culture that I'm in? What is the context, Aquarius? What's needed? Social justice comes up a lot with the 11th house. And the idea of activism, helping other people. One, Lady Gaga comes to mind again, in the sense that she is this creatively actualized being. If any of you have seen her perform, I get the chills when I watch her perform. She's alive and lit and really, really talented. But you hear her talk about what she values, and she's really concerned about helping humanity. And then you have celebrities that have less of a relatable public image because they don't put off that vibration of caring about the rest of the reality that they're in relationship with. They just care about themselves. And even so, that is a process that people go through at any given time in self-development, when self-worth is being expressed through the vehicle of how bright can I shine? How big can I be? And when that comes to an end, when there's a limitation, it's how is this relating to other people? So I feel like those are a few things that I've now articulated in a few different ways. So I just want to check in if there's any questions or any direction anyone would like me to take.
Sabrina, could you please take this direction? Everyone that shines looks beautiful. It doesn't really matter what they're creating or how they're creating it. The fact that they're shining and creating is just so beautiful. What do you think?
I agree. I think that when people are sunshiny, basically Leo sun ruled, it does, especially with Pluto involved, it's going to transmit that frequency to other people. So you can see someone, I was just picturing more polarity point in it on Facebook, like pictures or videos of people dancing, and they're just dancing so well that you get the chills, you feel inspired, and it's really beautiful. And even if you're not a dancer, somehow you're still inspired to take your own craft or your own self-actualization to the next level. It's empowering. Another side of that could be the shadow element of Pluto, where someone sees someone else shining and they feel inferior or feel jealous. And that can come up too. And that's actually one of the blockages that could come up with Pluto and Leo, or Pluto in the fifth house, is the sense that I'm not allowed to shine. Like I have to be humble, or people will get jealous, or the fear of attention. Some people who are really creative and really talented, it doesn't necessarily go hand in hand that they want to be recognized or have attention drawn to them. But sometimes it's like the matter of activism, 11th house, is to go ahead and share their light. And it's very much detachment, 11th house, of the outcome. So a person isn't sharing their gifts to get a certain type of reception from their audience. They're sharing their gifts because it's part of their nature. And it's important to be detached as to allow that to come through. One thing that, if we're going to look at this from a soul level, the ego is the vehicle that the soul is driving. The personality is the vehicle that the soul is driving. And so the soul, in a sense, becomes a guardian of this current ego or this current personality. And the soul can choose to facilitate the ego's journey at whatever phase of development it's at, or to be afraid, to be repelled by it, and to be like, I don't want to draw attention to myself. Every time that I go dance in public, people stare at me and I feel weird. And so there can be even, there's two different sides of that spectrum of being really attached to getting attention and being well received by an audience, versus wanting to be hidden and not wanting to receive that attention because that's not the desire nature. So either way, Aquarius and 11th house benefits. If, someone is too, and I don't mean to shame self-involvement at all. I think that the distinction I mean to draw is that a person is so self-involved that they can't see reality from other people's point of view, which is going to create relationship distress. And at the same time, there's certain kind of relationships that someone who is in that personality structure will attract, kind of like the narcissist and the empath, for example. So someone who's running a narcissistic process to a high degree might attract an empath who's more absorbing the narcissist fire, and they have this kind of symbiotic relationship and learn from each other, but also it doesn't always work out that smoothly. That being said, there's going to be limitations to real intimacy or real connection that someone who's running narcissistic process to an extreme can really have. So if they learn about detachment, or to see themselves from a farther out lens, or to see reality from other people's point of view, they can connect better. And likewise, someone who is hiding themselves because they don't want attention, that's still ego in some way. And they can access the Aquarius side of it, of seeing how we don't really own our gifts in a sense. Pluto, this is a possessive symbol. There's a natural inconjunction between the Leo and Pisces archetype. So our talent, Leo, our shining, and source. And they powerfully interact with each other. We get our gifts from source. And on the ego or a control-based level, we can decide if we're going to allow those gifts to flourish and allow them to be shared, 11th house, or if we're going to hide them, but then also feel alienated from our reality because we're interacting without really being ourselves. So, long answer to that. Yeah.
Now, Sabrina, what about the Leo personality being too dominant? The Leo personality that takes up all the space and does not give others an equal chance.
Yeah, that exists. It's like also being in the limelight, being in center stage. And so it's like having a psychology around creating reality. And so here's another place where the polarity point would make sense, which is Aquarius, which I think of the network of people involved, the ecosystem that's involved, and being in balance and in harmony with that at a high resonant level, versus being having that kind of director take. And at the same time, it's going to be a natural talent that a person has access to if that's something they know how to do. And there may be situations where that actually is really appropriate. And it would be finding where that skill is really valued, as well as also tapping into the empowerment piece of Pluto, which is, if they know how to have the show or how to be the dominant persona, they can also use that energy to inspire and uplift and empower the creative development of other people. And one way that they might think they're doing that, but not, is if they, in empowering other people, they're still playing director and being like, here's your role, do that because I think you're good at that, versus really allowing the other person to flourish in the way that they need to. So it would be more of that also Aquarius balance of perceiving from a detached sense who other people really are, versus who that Pluto in the fifth or Pluto in Leo thinks that someone else is.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Thanks for that.
I'd like to ask, since Leo is commonly associated with children, how, as far as these individuals with their own children,
Wait,
sort of,
how what?
How they are with their own children. Is there karma with children?
Yes. Yes.
I can answer that one.
Okay. I just didn't hear the whole question, is all.
Okay. Well, I have two daughters that have a lot of planet in Leo, and it made me realize what was the Leo about, what was the fifth house about. And it is about the inner child. It is about being young and free and not having any purpose other than being there and having fun and look at me mom, and I think that all the children have the right to get that kind of attention, to receive it from the parents and to receive it from the society in general. I think our attitude with the children have changed tremendously. And you know, like, since I have the Pluto in Leo, and I mean, I come from a very large family where, you know, like, you have, my parents had Pluto in Cancer, so they wanted us to fit in the mold and not to be different and not to be, you know, making too much wave and not to, you know, be quiet and, you know, no, don't call attention on yourself. And if you are not a squeaky wheel, you don't receive the attention. And being good Catholic, you just sacrifice, you just keep quiet, and you just endure. So yeah, so like when I have children, I figured it. And one of the keywords also for the Leo in the fifth house is love. You know, like the children's need to receive the love and attention and all of, you know, all of their needs being filled, and this is the way they become very charismatic. This is the way they become themselves, and this is the way there is no distortion in wanting to have the attention just for the sake of having the attention.
So that's I hear the transmutation part of Pluto in that. A lot of the Pluto and Leo generation, the parenting styles that they were parented with involved a kind of diminishment of the child in some way.
Yes.
Like, stay, you know, I'm not going to see you or validate you. You need to just be this specific way or get out of the way. So that...
Yeah, children were seen, not heard.
Yeah. So this was a generation that kind of took on that transmutational work. Obviously, not everyone in that generation had that, or that there was a different layer or spectrum of that for everyone.
Sorry.
Oh, and the other thing I was thinking was that there's a difference between the child on the developmental level of receiving that kind of attention versus what happens when an adult is operating from that psychology, and how the Leo archetype involves a different layer of maturity in adulthood. And so there's a different kind of childlike quality in an adult. And Pluto in the fifth house could be kind of figuring out what that is, like how to have that kind of innocence and play, but still be in integrity when there's situations that require maturity or responsibility, as well as, you know, discovering what that balance is.
I was thinking in terms of Wanda's question, so Pluto and Leo soul comes into life, right? It's their karma, it's their Pluto, right? And they have children, and those children, especially if, you know, there's planetary dynamics with their own Pluto, will trigger, you know, stuff in that Pluto and Leo person. So, I mean, I think it's kind of a big general question, right? And then you think it can be answered with a generalization? I'm not sure.
There's a few things. I'm glad to hear that rephrased, because I couldn't hear the whole question. Well, essentially, the Pluto in Leo or Pluto in fifth house parent is going to have, I mean, I guess there's transference between like any two people, but it might just be particularly psychologically potent to be a parent who has this signature, because the child is going to represent, it could be like vicarious parenting, or the sense of, I didn't have X when I was a kid, so I'm going to raise my kids to have that thing, regardless of whether or not the kids express that they want that. At the same time, the souls that are attracted to being born through those parents might actually be resonating with the particular structure that that parent is going to be facilitating. So it's hard to say.
Yeah. This is Wendy. I just want to say, it's interesting because both my parents, Pluto and Leo, but early degrees, right? I'm a Leo sun, 17 degrees. My mother had Jupiter and Leo right on my sun, and she had the North Node in Leo. And she was a rising Aquarian, and she had Uranus in the 4th house. So it was so hard for her to actually show up in her North Node in a healthy way. It was so interesting. So she had this whole dynamic going with the Leo archetype, but she really couldn't show up for her kids because she was so undervalued as a child herself. So she had no skills whatsoever to parent. So I don't know if that it's just interesting, right? We have these dynamics. Our parents choose them, we choose them. So
Yeah.
Wanda maybe has a deeper question somewhere.
I think that in the case that you're talking about, there's two things operating. One is that if there's unactualized creative potential in the parent, they're going to have a child that carries that torch. And this could be very unconscious to all parties involved. And so there's a triggering dynamic inherently in that. Another thing that came to mind was that someone told me that his mother had mentioned that a child is like the, two people create a child, and this, there's something about, like, how did he phrase it? There's something unresolved in the relationship between the parents, because no human relationship is 100% perfect. There's some kind of mismatch somewhere, something that can't be resolved. And so the child, being the product of that, is going to resolve that, because they have both parents' psychology being inside of them. So they're going to be the resolution of that which the parents did not fully meet on. So even, another thing to think about as a metaphor is the way that a romantic relationship, a partnership, could change when a child is introduced. That's a stressor to some extent, even if it's a planned and like desired child, or there's still this stress. And I'm not speaking from experience, I'm speaking from study and just contemplating it, so forgive that, but this is what I've heard, that it's an interruption to whatever was happening before. So there's kind of like a death of the old relationship, the old partnership, the old freedoms, and this birth of this new like assimilation of both beings. So that's another element of that. I think that along with narcissism and just even children, so either one, there could be this sense of like total admiration of someone who's running narcissistic process, or a child who's getting a lot of admiration from a parental figure or admiration from people around them, versus a kind of, and this is like a sad image is just coming to mind of like a child whose parent, one or both parents, feels like that child ruined their life in some way, and how even if that parent plays the part properly and is a responsible parent, there's still some kind of psychological venom at any degree being transmitted of like, you ruined my life. And so there's this wound there. And so either way, if it's immense adoration of like, you're this perfect angelic being, you're so talented, you're so amazing, or this like, this rejection, it's not necessarily seeing the other person for who they actually are. It's another person's psychology projecting onto that person based on the way that that person triggers them. So even narcissism, separate from that, if we start with the person themselves playing out a narcissistic construct, you can think of it like this great costume that is like really sparkly and beautiful, and it is a lot of you can't see someone in that. You can see something that they are becoming, but or radiating out, but there's still some kind of obscuring of their general nature. In some cases, in other cases, performance art or becoming this grand thing is actually a great expression of soul. But there would need to be some, degree of flexibility of navigating different personas in different moments of a person versus having this kind of fixed construct projected onto someone of like, oh, you're famous, like, this is just who you are, or, you're my child that I had before I was ready, this is who you are. I'm not sure how to wrap up that thought. The sense that there is really this desire to be seen, and great ways that a person can be not seen through this kind of planetary alignment, anything to do with Leo, but especially hard planets involving Leo.
Thanks, Sabrina. I just wanted to share that I had a Pluto and Leo mother. She was very young. She had me at a very young age. And
do you mean Pluto on the 5th?
No, my Pluto's in the 10th, at the end of the 10th. And my mother was a Pluto in Leo, and her Pluto was on my midheaven. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just, I thought you were Pluto and Leo, and how is your mother also Pluto and Leo?
Yeah, because she had me at the age of 16.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she was like a very young mother. And she was, everything revolved around her, and her 3 children, we were totally ignored, and we got no attention whatsoever. She took all the attention, and we acted like her mother. And she was not nurturing at all, and she had no parenting skills. She was very dominating. And also I have a moon in Leo daughter myself, and we get on incredibly well. We're very close. She's incredibly creative, and I suppose she carries the torch, as you say. I just have a question, and one more thing. My creativity was very blocked most of my life, and it only really started to flourish in the last 10 years or so. So that's a 10th house correlation of, the Saturnian correlation. And I just have a question for you. How does projection operate in Aquarius? Because projection is an Aquarian archetype and something that is really hard to grasp. Could you help with that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came to mind was astral projection, or the sense of people sharing dreams. So 2 people meeting on the dream plane, that feels like it's super Aquarian to connect on that level. And there's some degree of projection possible within that if beings can connect on that level of psychic telepathy. I think telepathy is very Aquarian, even though it could seem like a water experience of Scorpio or Pisces. There's an Aquarian element to it. It's like sharing a radio station with someone, sharing the airwaves. And I know from like personal experience, having psychic communication with someone, you can project a lot onto that of like, oh, we're sharing this mental space together. It must mean something, or there's this beautiful story about what that means. but you can still just project all of your fifth house romance fantasies or creative actualization fantasies onto that. So that's what came to mind first. I'm trying to think of how to draw from that more. Well, yeah, I think that with Aquarius, we're going to have things that are outside of the known. And because of that, we're going to project our own psychology, our own self-centric awareness of reality onto the unknown to some degree. Yeah, there is something really to go to, because this is still a mystery to me. It still really intrigues me the way that people can share space psychically, and yet what does that mean? I suppose, another thing we could look at is very highly resonant relationship, Aquarius. The way that there's electric connection between people, say there's a soul connection, some kind of past life. The way that those people connect is on a higher frequency than normal. They're gonna think to go to the same place at the same time and bump into each other by chance. They're going to, have these really resonant parallel lives for years and both move to the same town at the same time and meet in this really highly electric Aquarian way. And at the time of meeting, when such a resonant collision of people occurs, both people bring their self-actualizing romantic fantasies onto the other. And so it inverses that process. And then trauma can occur as well when there's that, electric connection with another being. We project all of our fifth house romance stuff onto that, and then something happens to break the connection apart, or it's just not meant to be, or it was like, harmonic for a moment and then it separates again. And there's the whole like heartbreak, Pluto, fifth house, and that feeling of like, was it me? Is there something, and versus for, as an example, fifth house Pluto composite in a relationship chart is going to speak to a very highly creative partnership, beautiful co-creation potentials. And then I think Jeffrey Wolf Green had worded it in one of the interpretations as there might be times of separation between souls that share a fifth house Pluto composite, in which they're doing things with their lives that has nothing to do with the other. Yet from the perspective of the egocentric Leo psychology, it's how could this person betray me, or am I not, good enough, or any of those kind of thoughts, when there's really just this separate destiny occurring. So I think that the level of projection that happens with Aquarius, it's projecting something so personal onto something that's so vastly impersonal. Aquarius, we could argue, is a very impersonal sign in certain ways. It's also about, this resonant electric connection with other people, but it feels more like radio particles fitting in where they fit in. And, here's a connection here. I'm going to dance with this person, and it's meant to be at this moment, and then we're going to break apart and do something else. There's this freedom that comes with Aquarius. And Leo, we might think of more with the sense of loyalty, or like a pride of lions. They like stick together, but Aquarius is like, ravers or something at a party. And there's a similar camaraderie, but a different way that they break apart than when you picture a pride of lions, and the way that they're more likely to stay together. So
So Sabrina, you spoke about the partners projecting meaning onto each other, and one partner projecting the importance of their own creativity out there. But my question is, what about the true meaning of the creativity? You know, would that lie in Taurus, do you think, the square to Taurus?
The true meaning of the creativity of
the creation, the true meaning of the creation, yeah.
That's a beautiful question. I'm not really sure how to, why do you think of Taurus with that?
Oh, well, Taurus brings value and meaning and purpose to life, to one's life. And I'm not really sure where meaning comes from. I just associated with Taurus automatically, but I haven't really thought about it very deeply. But then as you were speaking, I thought, okay, if the narcissistic person is going to keep pointing to themselves or pointing to or projecting onto the other, what is the truth of the situation? What is the true meaning of the creation?
Well, one thing also that makes me think of is that the fifth house composite Pluto, there's this great connection, great co-creation, but the 11th house polarity in terms of a relationship is what culture, what society is this person or is this relationship taking place in? So the truth of the connection, in some terms, truth might just be about what exists. And if something's not true, then it doesn't exist. It's hard to say what is true and what's not true if all these things do exist. But I'm thinking about like a dream. And this is Pluto too. So it's like there's a certain degree of free will. With destiny, we get to walk the path of destiny. Sometimes destiny comes to us, and there's other times that souls can really avoid their destiny. They're repelled by it. You know, a Pluto in the fifth house is not necessarily a signature of someone that actualizes it. It could also be that they've been afraid of it and it doesn't come to pass. And so that can be a, tragedy. We often talk about trauma in terms of Aquarius and 11th house, but tragedy is the Leo side of it because it's the drama, the beauty of Leo. And when that is not actualized, not given enough space, there's the tragedy element that comes through. So in terms of meaning, that gets into this like existential territory of like, what is meaning? And I'm not quite sure how to answer it in this context.
I think I may have answered it for myself. I have Pluto and Leo, and I'm also going through Pluto transits, and I've been going through Pluto transits for the last 8 years. I'm pretty sure Pluto does not respect the ego, like the narcissist. Pluto wants a higher purpose for humanity, for the survival of the species. So I'm thinking the Pluto polarity point in Aquarius would have something to do with a group, higher purpose for the group and for humanity. What do you think?
I'm thinking about empowerment and the ability to manifest, and that if a person is just running their own process in the Leo realm, that they might have, either literally or symbolically, this kind of unrecognized artist syndrome of like, I'm doing this beautiful thing and no one cares about it. And interacting with other, building a bridge, being part of community is how those gifts get used. And so I think that a person who is essentially, they're like suffering, they want to be recognized, they want to be seen, they're in this kind of ego narcissism state, they can basically be relieved of that once they stop believing in the drama of, any kind of beliefs that they form out of that, of you know, no one caring about them or the world not recognizing them or anything like that, and starting to be more scientific about how reality works. And I think about networking, you know, if we're thinking about someone wanting to actualize their career, and it's often said in many different industries that it's not about how talented you are, it's about who you know. And it's like people say that in this like jaded way, and at the same time there's a reality to that, in terms of you could be doing brilliant things and, you know, yelling out that into the world, but people care more about what you're doing when you're connected to them. And you might have had this experience of having a friend who cares about something deeply that you didn't think to care about before, but because you hear them care about it, you're inspired. So a person who is just doing their own thing and being excessively leonine about their process, you know, to think Leo likes an audience. The audience could be likened to Aquarius. And there's different ways that Leo can relate to audience, and there's a relationship there. And if there's this more entitlement, diva kind of quality to the person, to their audience, that can attract a certain kind of audience. It's not to say they won't have an audience, but the interaction is going to be colored by that to some extent. So a person wanting to actualize their destiny on some level, it's not just theirs. They don't own it exclusively. It's not a privatized, like, individual thing. It's part of the whole ecosystem of humanity. And so to have success relative to one's own self-actualization, there's an importance of the involvement of community and other beings within it. And I think that that's where the Aquarius part comes in.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I think there are a lot of Pluto and Leo people who have successfully integrated this polarity. And I feel the meaning would come in a socially relevant purpose, and also in giving each individual space to express their uniqueness. And the Leo loyalty and magnanimous nature would come in there to actually allow others, not allow, but to freely allow others to express themselves as well. What I'm saying is, it's not just this ego that needs attention, but this ego can then be put to use in helping other people express themselves as well. So let's take it up a bit. Let's go towards the integration of this polarity.
The integration, it feels like the ego having a socially relevant purpose. And so the sense that we don't have to, you know, free ourselves from ego or abandon it or something like that, but that the ego is actually a vehicle that can be used for a higher purpose. I agree with that. That's what I think when with Leo and Aquarius put together, there's a side to activism or a side to Aquarius that doesn't include Leo, that is kind of more like communism or something, where here's this group ideal and you can't be an individual and you can't shine, everyone needs to be the same, versus this sense of cooperation and community and social relevancy, but with people being special and unique inside of that in their own way, in their own actualized way. And I think that for that reason, it's not selfish to develop oneself. It is an act of activism, because we're all here for a reason. If there's an intelligence and order to creation, we are all incarnated at the same time together for beautiful reasons. And so if there's an activist or humanitarian quality to shining, to embodying one's magnificence from the Leo side of things. So I think that inherently that the polarity does blend that way. And part of it, I'm having a hard time trying to articulate that. It's the sense of seeing the bigger picture with oneself being a part of it. And so it's not just about shining and everyone else is, you know, secondary to that vision, or a person's at the top of the pyramid. It's a sense of equality, of other beings' specialness mattering just as much, and that there's really a cooperation between self-actualization or self-actualizing identities, which I picture almost as a vision of utopia as well, the sense that we have a community of people that are all self-actualized.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. Thank you so much. And I think Marie has something to say. Go ahead, Marie.
Yes, thank you. I was thinking, is not Jeff Green that mentioned at some point that the Pluto in Leo cannot create just from its own need for creation, but that it has to like feel the need of the community. He has to find his audience. He has to create to fill the need that is around him.
Right. I think he was even talking about source in general too, that a person with fifth house Leo or fifth house Pluto or Pluto and Leo, that one psychological limitation that can occur is to think that a person is on an egocentric level responsible for everything they manifest.
Yes.
Which I'm saying is a limitation, because we're also co-creating. And so if a person uses that fifth house Pluto energy to co-create either with the culture around them, which is more Aquarian, or with source, which is more Piscean or Neptunian, that expands that person. It gets rid of the limitation of one being the, you know, the pure director of reality. So that is a good point about involving other forces.
Sabrina, also, I think it's interesting that the North Node of Neptune is in Leo. So a way to directly spiritualize our lives is through Leo. Could you comment on that?
Well, this is news to me. I don't really know about the nodes of the planets because my software doesn't include that, so I just haven't been looking into that. But as a concept, I love that. I think, you know, my Chiron is in the fifth house in Leo, so one of my passions is to see people and to, you know, use astrology and my studies of psychology to see people deeply and validate who they are. Because I think that there's intrinsic spiritual value in who we actually are, and in shining and being inspired and being joyful. I think that play and experiencing joy is a great spiritual resource. You know, it's part of how someone had described it to me as one purpose of romance is having these islands of bliss that empower you to take on the challenges of life. So that's just on a side note as well, but I think that there's this old vision of spirituality that's very austere, that is this sense that a person's self-actualization, their Leo side doesn't matter. They just need to be detached, Aquarius, like wise and stoic, and, you know, go off in a mountain somewhere and meditate. And to be that detached from reality does offer a person a lot of wisdom and equanimity, but then it's like, why are you denying the vessel that you're in, its creative potential? What's the point of that? There's actually something deeply meaningful about existing, and that we are the divine experiencing itself through this very particular incarnation that never was before, and I suppose never will be again. I don't really know if time, maybe it will loop over again, but for our intents and purposes, this is a unique incarnation. And to deny it, its self-actualization is to deny part of creation. It's to judge part of creation. So there's some beautiful spiritual value in just being who we are and letting that come out, as well as if there's whatever we alchemically create within ourselves, we empower other people to do too. Even if, it's not as obvious as teaching someone else something we've learned or writing a book about it, but just being who we are is transformational. So I think that when spirituality happens on earth and it's not somewhere that we go to or escape to, that this earth life is deeply spiritual, then being who we are is by extension a pinnacle of spirituality. So in that way, I think about self-actualization as deserving more conversation and more importance than it has in some scenarios. And at the same time, a lot of people are interested in it, and it is a thing, but it is also something that I witness like shame around, this sense of like, oh, I can't be too self-involved, when we have a right to exist and a right to blossom and flourish. And on some level of like Leo nobility, even the duty to do that, I would say.
That's great. So we'll be winding down soon. Any final questions or comments?
I have one that I haven't been able to really form, but I'm Pluto and Leo, but I have Mars and Scorpio, and I feel like a lot of the Pluto and Leo has been mitigated by not wanting to be exposed or wanting, hiding. Would you talk just a little bit about that?
That was something that we were talking about a little bit earlier too, in the sense that, Pluto is about secrecy and Leo is about one's self-actualization. And even without Pluto in this scenario at all, Leo naturally squares Scorpio. And it's really very common that people hide or diminish their talents or their brightness for fear of jealousy or reactions from others which are threatening on a psychological level. So that's why there's some, the potency of the empowerment element of Leo is that we shine in this more Aquarian detached way, where we're not attached to the results of our actualization. We're doing it because it's just honoring our nature and honoring the ecosystem that we're a part of. It's not for the intrinsic, or it's not the reward of it.
That's brilliant. That was absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you're tuning into your Chiron in the 5th, are you?
Yes.
Okay. And I think Wanda had one question there as well.
I just had a thought with the south node of Pluto is in Capricorn, and with that north node of Neptune in Leo, maybe that is since our self-actualization was always determined by someone else, and only very few people got to actualize themselves, and it doesn't do the whole society, which is what Neptune and Pisces represents to me. Each person being who they are and who they were created to be contributes to the whole, because each one of those parts are needed. So maybe that as far as the Pluto in the 5th, that's or Pluto in Leo, that is their role to bring that out now, so that we can each person bring out their gifts, so that everybody can contribute to the whole to advance civilization's evolution.
Totally. And it sounds like you're bringing up a collective trauma too, the sense of, I'm just like picturing the proverbs around like, if you stand too tall above the crowd, you'll get squished down. Just this kind of human collective keeping each other down phenomenon that was keeping the social order for a given amount of time, and that I think now to survive with the, turmoil on the planet, it actually requires a lot of creativity. We have a lot of immense problems that need innovative solutions, and to really have those innovations come forth requires that people self-actualize. So now the social order is asking for people to stand out, versus for everyone to fit in.
Yeah, that was a great question, Wanda. That was really good. So Sabrina, the nodes are moving into Leo and Aquarius just in a few months' time. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I was thinking about that in terms of the South Node, like remembering our ability to detach, remembering our ability to become almost like meditative and, non-attached to reality. But to take it a step further, move into the North Node in Leo and to create. And so to create from that sense of freedom. Because I think that, if the direction is Leo and it's coming from Aquarius, I just picture that memory of like, okay, we're free, we're totally free, and the application is here. The application is our creativity. So I hope to see some kind of collective excitement about meditation or something like that, that's for the South Node. And for the Leo aspect of that, to perhaps see the social value in creativity and play, and enjoyment and love and heart opening too. Because I think that, again, facing the activist stuff that Aquarius represents, the crisis of the world, it's not just about using our minds, it's also about engaging our hearts and really being open to the, immensity of what's happening on the planet right now, and to meet that from a heart place. And I think that will be super evolutionary, because there's some kind of history around, doing things according to like science, or some kind of like left-brained logical point of view, and that some advancements that our culture needs are really just about, well, what's the loving thing to do, what's coming from the heart. So I know that even that can sound sappy, but I mean, I really mean it. I think that if the heart is left for later, of like, attend to reality first, and the heart and love as a luxury, I don't trust those decisions. I think that the decisions of, how the planet is going to be led and affected needs to come from a really engaged heart place, to have the effect on reality that would be desirable, versus continuing to perpetuate a disaster or suffering.
Yeah, that was really beautiful. And what about astrology? Aquarius being astrology, and there certainly are many astrologers being very creative out there, aren't there?
Yeah.
And working together, and yeah.
Maybe an element of that too would be getting more playful about how we actualize ourselves with astrology. So playing with the symbols, versus thinking that they are these fixed realities of, I have Venus in Pisces and that's going to mean this one thing for me. And there can be a lot more play and creative exploration of our chart symbols. And it might just be a matter too of learning how the system, Aquarius works, so that it can be played with. But I'd love to see astrology getting more popular as time goes on.
Oh, it's hugely popular.
But even more so, I would love if people knew what a sextile and what a trine was, with the same kind of vocabulary recognition as when we talk about certain psychological terms like codependent, and people know what that is. I think it would be great if collective awareness around astrology became more and more nuanced.
Well, teaching it in schools would be a great idea. I hope I live to see that happen. So any final questions or comments, and any final thoughts from you, Sabrina?
Thank you all so much for your questions. They've been really engaging and fun to think about.
Okay, shall we wind down, or?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this meeting. Thank you so much, Sabrina. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina.
Yes,
Thank you.
Loved it.